It was a Tuesday afternoon in a town where the streets were paved with the kind of money that usually buys silence, but on this day, the silence was broken by the sound of a hand striking a cheek. Maya, a graduate student working an extra shift to pay for her tuition, stood frozen in the center of the upscale café. Across from her stood Julian, the son of the town's most powerful mayor, his face twisted in a mask of entitlement that made the air in the room feel heavy and suffocating. He didn't just slap her, he dismissed her existence as if she were nothing more than an obstacle in his day. He walked away laughing, surrounded by friends who were too afraid of his father's reach to even look her in the eye. He truly believed that this moment would be erased by sunrise, just like every other mistake he had made in this town. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Maya felt the sting on her face, but she felt the injustice in her heart even more. She had spent years watching people like Julian treat the world as their personal playground, shielded by the iron grip his father held over the police department and the local media. Most people would have gone home, cried, and hoped the situation simply vanished, but Maya reached into her pocket. She pulled out her phone and made a single, calculated call. She wasn't calling a friend or a family member to vent her frustration. She was calling an investigative journalist who had spent 3 years trying to find a crack in the mayor's granite wall of protection. She knew that if she could just get this one incident on the record, the entire house of cards built by the mayor would begin to tremble and eventually fall to the ground. The town of Oak Ridge was a place where reputation was currency, and Julian was the golden heir to a fortune built on political favors and backroom deals. He had grown up with the understanding that his name carried a weight that could stop an investigation in its tracks. Whenever a witness came forward, they were suddenly silenced by a mysterious lack of evidence or a sudden change of heart. Julian's life was a series of unchecked impulses, each one emboldened by the knowledge that his father would handle the consequences. Maya, on the other hand, was invisible to the people in power. She was just another face in the crowd, working hard and playing by the rules, never expecting that the rules would be used as a weapon against her. She was a woman from a working-class background who had fought for every inch of her progress, and she wasn't about to let a spoiled heir take her dignity away. By the time the sun began to set, the police had already arrived at the café, but they didn't come to take a report about an assault. They came to ensure that Julian was comfortable and that the staff knew how to keep their mouths shut. The officer in charge, a man who had been a loyal servant to the mayor for over 2 decades, walked past Maya as if she were a ghost. He gathered the security tapes, not as evidence for a crime, but as a precaution to ensure they were never seen by human eyes again. He patted Julian on the shoulder, offering a smirk that communicated absolute security. They thought they had secured the narrative. They thought that by the next morning, the incident would be nothing more than a rumor whispered in the back of the café, a story that would lose its teeth as the days passed and the town moved on to more pressing matters. But Maya had prepared for this exact scenario. She knew the reputation of the local police, and she knew that the security cameras in the café were only the first layer of the problem. What they didn't know was that she had been recording the entire interaction on her own device, hidden in her apron. More importantly, while the officer was busy confiscating the official records, Maya had already uploaded the footage to a secure server. The journalist she called was already driving toward Oak Ridge, armed with the evidence that would finally expose the mayor's reliance on fear and intimidation. The phone call she made wasn't just to report a crime, it was a signal for a much larger operation that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The mayor's son had made the mistake of targeting the one person who wasn't afraid to lose everything to secure the truth. The next morning, the town woke up to a reality that no one could have predicted. The footage of Julian slapping Maya wasn't just on the local news, it had been picked up by major networks and was circulating across every social media platform in the country. The visual evidence was undeniable, and the audio captured the arrogance in Julian's voice as he dared her to report him to the police. The public, who had long suspected that something was wrong with the way the mayor ran the town, finally had the catalyst they needed to voice their own grievances. People began to gather in the town square, not just because of the slap, but because the video represented every instance of corruption they had endured. The power that Julian once held felt like it was evaporating in real time as the national attention shifted its focus to their small, controlled environment. The mayor tried to salvage his image, appearing on television to offer a scripted apology for his son's behavior, claiming it was a momentary lapse in judgment. He spoke about his son's character and how he was a good person who had simply had a bad day. But the public wasn't buying the story he was selling. The journalist Maya had contacted began to release more information, documents showing how the mayor had used city funds to cover up Julian's past mistakes. Each new revelation added weight to the scandal, and suddenly, the mayor found himself isolated. His allies in the city council started to distance themselves, and the police officers who had previously followed his orders were now being questioned by federal agents. The empire that had been built on absolute control was finally beginning to crumble under the pressure of the truth. Julian, who had never known a day of true accountability in his life, found himself trapped in a situation where his name held no value. The legal system, which had always been his shield, now became the mechanism that would dismantle his future. He wasn't just facing charges for the assault on Maya, he was now the focal point of a massive federal investigation into his father's administration. He watched from the sidelines as the offices he used to walk through with complete confidence were raided and searched. The arrogance that had defined his personality started to dissolve into panic as he realized that no amount of money or political influence could stop the gears of justice once they were set in motion. He was now just another defendant, stripped of his privilege and forced to answer for the life he had led. Maya stood as the central figure in this unfolding drama, a symbol of resilience for everyone who had been pushed aside by the wealthy and the powerful. She faced death threats, intense scrutiny, and immense pressure from the mayor's legal team to drop the charges, but she remained steadfast. She had seen how the system operated from the inside, and she was determined to see it through to the end. The case eventually reached a courtroom where the cameras were rolling and the eyes of the nation were watching. The prosecution presented the evidence that Maya had so carefully protected, and for the first time, the mayor and his son were forced to listen to the consequences of their actions. The verdict wasn't just a win for Maya, it was a clear message that the law applied to everyone, regardless of their family name or their bank account. In the end, the town of Oak Ridge was changed forever. The mayor was forced to resign, and the administration that had ruled with an iron fist for decades was dismantled piece by piece. Julian was sentenced, and the era of impunity he had enjoyed was brought to a definitive close. Maya went back to her life, but she was no longer the invisible student she had once been. She had become an advocate for those who had been silenced, and her story served as a reminder of what could happen when one person decided that enough was finally enough. The lesson was clear: power is only as strong as the people who allow it to exist, and when someone decides to stand up and challenge the status quo, even the most powerful dynasties can be brought down by a single, brave phone call.